Hi, I'm John Matthews, veteran law enforcement officer and winery owner, and your host for the podcast version of True Crime and Wine. And I'm pleased that you've joined us for this very unique podcast where we feature the fascinating world of serial killers while we enjoy award-winning wine. So why serial killers and wine? Well, the answer is simple. Since I'm the only winemaker in the world who's captured a serial killer. And no, I didn't use wine. But this is real true crime and real wine. And each episode, myself and Brandy Diamond, the popular podcast host of Texas Wine and True Crime, which you can also hear on Spotify and all of your other podcast platforms, well, she joins me and together we take you on a journey profiling some of the most interesting and intriguing serial killer cases from all around the world. Well, we enjoy some of our favorite wines. Now, I've got my favorite Casaro wine today. It's our Bianco, but we'll talk more about that later. So pour yourself a glass of Killer Cabernet or Murderous Merlot and join us for the podcast version of True Crime and Wine. And as always, make sure you share the show on Facebook or your favorite platform with your friends and other true crime lovers. You can like it and subscribe on Spotify, Apple, or YouTube, or whatever your favorite podcast platform is. So let's get into today's show, The Pig Farmer. On this episode, we're going to take you on a journey profiling the life and the crimes of the pig farmer, a serial killer who literally hid in plain sight. As a matter of fact, he was often seen walking around downtown Vancouver and in the commercial area covered in blood, and yet no one seemed to notice or care. Now I want to welcome in my co-host, Brandy Diamond. And Brandy, can you believe that someone was so brazen to walk around covered in blood, even in front of the police?
John, typically I would say yes, that would be very obvious. And why would someone do that? That's trying to cover up his crimes. But we're going to find out that he was actually a pig farmer, John. So he slaughtered pigs for a living, and people knew about him, knew who he was. So they didn't think this was that unusual.
Yeah, and he literally hid in plain sight. You hear that phrase all the time, but we don't often think it's going to work. But in his case, it did. So, Brandy, today we bring the audience a very unique serial killer, one whose moniker was the pig farmer because he actually was a serial killer and a pig farmer. Now, his name was Robert Picton, and he grew up in poverty on a Canadian pig farm. And he worked the farm as a child, so that's really all that he knew. As a matter of fact, his parents wouldn't get any Parent of the Year awards. He often went to school unwashed, and his clothes were soiled and smelled of manure from the pig farm. He was strongly attached to his mother, but not his abusive father. He was actually deemed special needs in second grade. And one of the things that I found most interesting is that at age 12, he had raised a beloved calf right there on the farm. And he took care of it, and it was kind of his prized possession. And he was absolutely devastated when he came home from school one day and found out his father slaughtered it and then bragged about it. Now, he dropped out of school by 14 and spent the next 7 years working as a butcher's assistant. But you know what? After that, he returned to the place he was raised, back to the pig farm. Some comments on his background, because we do see some indicators with him that we've seen in other serial killers, and then we see some unusual ones.
Yeah, so we look at the special needs, right? Some of the serial killers that we've covered already, typically they're diagnosed for needing special needs, or, and again, unwashed, soiled clothes, sending your child, what other child wants to be around that, right? So you deal with being made fun of, maybe hard to make friends. Then he has a best friend, John, at 12, his beloved calf that he comes home to. I think of just like, my daughter who's 11, right? And having our dog and the cat, and just what that unconditional love feels like as a kid, loving something else. And it's just, I can only imagine how he felt coming home and knowing his own father had done this. Just terrible.
Yeah, heartbreaking. And kids get attached to the animals. You're exactly right. That unconditional love. I was talking to someone yesterday, and their son is 4, but they brought a new puppy home. And oh my gosh, you talk about embracing that puppy and loving it. And then can you imagine coming home one day and your father had slaughtered it and bragged about it? And this is not the only time I've heard this with serial killers. Unfortunately, I've seen several other cases where a serial killer as a child was greatly impacted by the parent killing its pet.
Just terrible. Just terrible. And then dropping out of school at 14, going then working as a butcher's assistant for 7 years. And then he returns to where he was raised. And that just doesn't seem to go well, John. Maybe in those 7 years he was had a better chance at life. Maybe he was feeling like he was a part of something, being that butcher's assistant. But was this sort of getting him ready for what's about to come and happen at this pig farm?
Yeah, and like so many of these offenders, we see sometimes when they're removed from the situation, like go to the military. We've seen this on 4, 5, 6 of our shows. It seems they then get out and go right back into that bad or abusive situation. Now, to kind of continue with his background, he was generally quiet, as you can imagine, because, like you said, he smelled, he didn't fit in with other kids, he was a loner. They often said he'd exhibit some strange or bizarre behaviors. Maybe that was from the special needs diagnosis. As he grew up in his later teen years and early 20s, he started frequenting Vancouver's downtown district. They called it the East Side or the Low Track area. And that's where prostitutes hung out, sex workers. You could see them all around the place. But he actually went down there at first on business because there was a rendering plant in that area. And that's where he disposed of animal parts. So his trips down there maybe started off very innocent. He would go from his farm, he would take the animal parts in to get rid of them, and run across these sex workers and prostitutes. Now, in the 1980s, he actually inherited his parents' farm, and him and his brother both co-owned it. And shortly after that, he sold off a small parcel of it for over $1 million. So now he's got all the cash that he needs, but he still lives in poverty. And we now see he's using the cash for drugs and prostitution. How does that kind of tie into a general background here?
Yeah, so I'm kind of thinking, he comes into money, never really had money, or now that also makes me think, were his parents able to kind of give him a better life, right? Clothing, washing his clothes. I mean, this is really hard. I mean, this isn't like, 1920s. I mean, we're talking about 70s, 80s.
Yep.
Why the poverty piece? I think that's the first thing that comes to my head. And then he continues to live that way and then chooses to use his money for, I don't know, love, touch, care, maybe those things he didn't get as a child. So that's kind of where my mind is going. Why not have a better lifestyle and use that money for something better? Why then are you rendering it to, or giving it to sex workers and prostitutes? So that's my first thought about this, John.
Yeah, it really is kind of a strange upbringing that you finally come into money, you'd think you'd want to get away, get a better house, get a better life. Um, Maybe it was because he was special needs. Maybe he didn't know anything different. Maybe he just didn't know how to get out of that situation. But I tell you, going from extreme poverty to having 1 million in cash, and that doesn't include his other property. He actually sold a part of it for a housing division. And I'm sure if he wanted to, he might have been able to sell the rest and triple, quadruple that type of income. But we certainly see some disturbing facts in the very beginning here. And we can kind of see, and again, this is where that nature and nurture comes together. Kind of see the makings of a killer, but not totally yet. We know he was lonely and a loner. I mean, my gosh, Brandy, if you went to school smelling like that, looking like that, are other kids going to like you? Are girls going to like you? Is anybody going to be attracted to you? So he was lonely, he was angry, he was isolated. Obviously, he wasn't popular or attractive to the girls his age, the girls in his class. We also understand that he was bullied. And that is very common too. The way he looked, the way he smelled, his mental health issues, all of that just is a bad, bad indicator. And then when he became exposed to the prostitutes and the drugs, it just was a slippery slope. And maybe he had a need for control to control something in his life. And unfortunately, that something was controlling the prostitutes, first the sexual behavior, then assaults, and then murder. And we've seen that slippery slope, or what we call the evolution of a serial killer, over and over again.
Well, John, I'm also thinking that need for control, right? So he was never able to control friendships, right? Have a sense of friendship, I think. Had people always wanting to get away from him, not closer to him. And so I think we see this a lot with the profiling. That's what makes our show just different, is you have experienced profiling these killers, and background is like, to me, such a big piece of this, because your mind is shaped and your behavior is shaped as you grow. And I think the need for control, at least for him in my eyes, is the ability to have someone like him, to be by him, whether it's for a relationship, which it's not, but it's just the ability to control the situation, because I just don't think he had any control over this stuff as an adolescent.
Well, he didn't. He didn't even, even his father, who killed his pet calf. I mean, there was absolutely no control there. So maybe that's where this is starting to come into play. He's got money now. He can spend money on the prostitutes. Maybe he can start controlling the prostitutes with the money, making them do things that they normally wouldn't do, or whatever. He's got the cash to do it. But yeah, I think it's almost in the beginning, a desperate outreach for some love or affection, whether it's paid for or not. But then it turns into, well, I don't even have control over this. So maybe if I can kill him, that will show that I've got some degree of control. And that kind of leads us to 1997 in his first kind of foray into this violence. And I see you've got the Bianco there. It's great. This is a great one. This is actually very refreshing as we're doing the show, I can tell you. But in 1997, he paid a prostitute extra to leave the East Side. And this is not uncommon. The prostitutes have a very small area that they live and work in. That's where their tricks go. That's where their pimps are. That's where their protection is. That's where they turn the tricks. So usually to get them to leave that kind of secure area, you got to pay him extra. We've got plenty of cash, and he did. And he paid this young lady to go to his pig farm. Once he got her there, though, he handcuffed her and stabbed her multiple times. But she was able to escape. It was miraculous. I actually went into the details of this kidnapping, which I think would have evolved into a murder. She actually got away from him and out of the house, and then he kind of lost track of her. She was found by an elderly couple. They took her on the side of the road, by the way, took her to a hospital. He had stabbed her so many times, she remained there for several weeks. Now, she obviously knew who it was. She knew where it was and everything. And the charges were filed against Pinkston for attempted murder and unlawful confinement, kidnapping, basically. But they were dropped, like we see so many times. And now he's free to escalate.
So when I was reading about this and I see the charges are dropped, I thought the same thing you did. Here we go again. You've got your guy. Let's put him away before he does this. And John, I'm not sure how I feel about the reason about why these charges were dropped. I mean, she was clearly knew where she had been. She clearly knew who this person was. She shared that information, but John, tell everyone why they dropped these charges.
Yeah, basically, simply because she was a prostitute. That was it. The prosecutors felt that she was a prostitute, she was a drug addict, and she was unreliable. And we have seen this, Brandy, over and over again. These prosecutors want 100% conviction. They're doing it for political reasons. And if they can't have an open and shut case, they dismiss it or they plead it out or something ridiculous. But in this case, they actually dropped the charges because she was a drug addict and what they said, quote, was an unreliable witness. Oh my God, you've been stabbed. You're in the hospital. There's physical injury. You know who did it. You know where they did it. You know who the suspect is. And that's not enough. Well, to make matters worse, Brandy, they did seize his boots and clothes from him at the time of the arrest, but they never tested anything. The blood, the hair, the DNA for 7 years. And when they finally did, they actually tied it back to 2 other missing women. So this may not have been his first at all. He probably did this and maybe got away with it, actually killed him earlier.
Well, and now you have them blaming it on the witness, right? The drug addict. She's unreliable. Yet she could tell you where she was, who did this to her, the couple that found her. She's in the hospital with stab wounds. I mean, just unbelievable that they have this. And then not to test the DNA evidence that is found. No urgency here, John. I don't know. I mean, they may not have had him solid 100% like you said, but it seems like there were some missed opportunities here.
And it seems like the victimology is starting to come into focus now. That we know about the other 2 missing women. We did find out they were prostitutes from the east side or low track area. So female prostitute. I think we're going to find out a little bit later. Many of them were indigenous. And so the local authorities said, okay, we let this guy go, but what else can we do? They started looking at his property. Well, what they discovered is on the property, which is now adjacent to a nice housing addition, right? Can you imagine? You have a pig farm and a nice housing addition. That's who bought the property. The developer gave them the money. They were having parties, big parties that violated zoning laws, parties that had drugs, that had prostitutes. And so the local authorities issued an injunction to the pig farm to stop violating these and stop hosting parties and authorizing the police to arrest anyone who violated the order. But get this, because the party barn was technically on his brother's piece of the property, he was not covered by the order. He was not covered by the injunction. He was not subject to arrest. Another missed opportunity, Brandy.
That's just unbelievable. I mean, Okay. So now they're at least watching him. He's on the radar. May not be perfect with the injunction that they've now put into place, but disappearance start happening. Are people starting to take notice of this in the community?
The community certainly is. And by community, it's not just the community of prostitutes, the community over there on the east side of town. It's actually the First Nations community because we now know between 1995 and 1997, 1 dozen women went missing from that downtown east side district. But unfortunately, because of who this was, sex workers, there were no homicides reported and no bodies found. You know, a lot of these people disappear. You don't know if they're in jail. You don't know if they moved to another city. You don't know if they got killed. You don't know if they committed suicide or overdose. This happens all around the world, not just in the US, not just in Canada, all around the world. This is a victim pool that is very hard to track and very easy to lose track of because there is no one advocating for them, right? There's no family coming forward many times. Often these girls leave home, the family never sees them again or doesn't see them for years. So how do they know if they're missing? Many of the women we've learned were Indigenous women in Canada or First Nations women. We have that same problem here in the United States, Brandy. There is a significant number of Native American women that leave the reservation and just disappear.
John, that's where, I have some roots now in New Mexico, and this is you can't drive on a freeway or an isolated road going through this state without seeing billboards of missing Indigenous women. It is a huge problem in, like you said, in the U.S., huge problem in the communities, and it's hard to track them. Maybe some of them are prostitutes, maybe some of them are drug addicts. The family hasn't heard from them, or maybe the family has heard from them and then report them missing, but they don't know where or who they would be with. So, I know police have a lot to investigate. And so these kind of go by the wayside. And so I know that there's a lot of people just trying. They're asking for the help. I mean,
Yeah,
this is a huge problem.
it is. It's a huge problem. I've worked in Indian country for about 2 decades now. I've actually been on the ground personally in over 50% of the tribal nations here in the United States and some in Canada. So I'm very, very familiar with this problem. But again, sometimes the girls simply run away. They want a different life. They don't want to be on the reservation. Other times they do fall into prostitution, and then culturally, they're not accepted back very readily. And they just simply don't return and they fall off the radar. And this we saw not only in 1995, 6, and 7, but with Picton, we also saw this in 1998, where we know just from the east side alone, another 9 women disappeared throughout the year. So if we're already into the 20s here of women that disappeared. But we've also learned a little bit more by this time about his MO. And most of it came from the victim who got away, who said he kept handcuffs, a belt, and wire in his bedroom under his mattress. He would have sex with the women. He would stroke their hair. He would tell them everything was going to be all right. And he'd reach under the mattress, grab the handcuffs, grab the wire. He enjoyed strangling them. He would then take them to his slaughterhouse, hang them on hooks, cut them, and let them bleed out. He then fed the bodies to the pigs. And whatever was left over went into 55-gallon drums along with the pig remains, and then taken to Vancouver and disposed of at the rendering plant. All very similar to a murder we talked about not long ago, where he's using his tools his assets and his resources, which is the pig farm, the perfect cover for hair and fiber and blood and skin and parts. And he's got a legal way to dispose of everything, not just feeding it to the pigs, but anything that remains goes to the rendering plant with all of the pig remains, and they simply dispose of it. No evidence whatsoever.
I mean, unbelievable. And I'm thinking about, taking them to the slaughterhouse, putting them on the hooks, bleeding them out. I mean, John, that's a whole other level of sociopathic behavior of just, there's an enjoyment to that. It's almost, did he find this kind of enjoyment doing it to pigs? Like, I kind of think, like, was there something that he enjoyed about this, but did he also enjoying it doing it to livestock? And where this fascination, but getting rid of the parts. I mean, John, I've covered a few cases when there have been slaughterhouses feeding parts to pigs. You're never going to find them. There's a missing persons case out of Texas, and police believe that the reason they have found nothing of him is because of this, because of feral pigs. And so what a way to, one, have isolation to do this, to be able to cut them up and know how to get them out off the property and put the parts somewhere where nobody's going to find them. I mean, just unbelievable. And like you said, he walked around with blood on him. People knew this guy did this for a living. So no suspicion. No, except for the fact, that he stabbed a woman and she escaped.
Yeah. He literally had been doing this his whole life, right? Slaughtering the animals, bringing them to town, bringing them to the rendering plant. He just took it to the next level of control. He spent time with the prostitutes. That wasn't enough. It didn't give him the high. He then tortured them. That wasn't enough. It didn't give him the high. He then killed them. That wasn't enough. It didn't give him the high. And he decides, I can butcher them and dispose of them. And you know what? I finally have some control in my life. I finally can control my life because I can take these women, I can take their life away, and I can make them disappear, and nobody knows but me. On each episode of True Crime and Wine, we feature one of our Casaro Winery brands. And it's fitting to share with everyone what I'm enjoying today, a glass of our Bianco, a dry white wine made from 100% Trebbiano, Texas-grown grapes. This Casaro white wine has floral expressions and a light, invigorating taste. And let me tell you, I've really enjoyed it all throughout the show. And there's no better way to enjoy your favorite podcast or television show than having a glass of Casaro wine. To order yours, just go to CasaroWines.com and get your favorite True Crime and Wine brand or any of our other popular brands. Salud.
So, John, we talk about missed opportunities in a lot of the cases that we've already covered, and some of the cases we'll be covering going forward. By this time, the murders and missing people started in 95. This is now 1998, a few years later. You had someone that escaped from the pig farm, gave the details. That was another missed opportunity. Then you had Indigenous and other women going missing that police were not taking seriously or really not investigating. And in 1998, another anonymous call is made to police asking them to investigate Picton in the disappearance of numerous missing women. So you have phone calls coming in. We see this a lot in these cases, but what is your sense of what's happening now in 98 with the police?
Well, one of the things that we do know is that a worker at his farm thought something wasn't right, okay? Thought that women were coming in, that he would see them, notice Picton was with them, and then he wouldn't see him anymore. And so one of the workers actually called the police and said, you need to look into this. Something's going on. So the Vancouver Police Department actually assigned Detective Constable and a Royal Canadian Mounted Police Sergeant to the case. And they said, let's look into all these women who are missing in Vancouver. And they started following up and filing reports on these First Nations peoples, women specifically, that were missing from the East Side. But the reports were stymied by the agency.
So you have the police reports, you have the people, you have workers calling it in. Um, and then so then Bill Hiscox reported to police that he was the worker at the farm, and his girlfriend said she had seen bags of bloody clothes, numerous purses, and ID cards. So now we're talking physical evidence here. Do they do anything with this?
And apparently the girlfriend at some point had access to the trailer home that Pinkton was staying in. And that's where she saw these purses, bloody clothing, and ID cards. And she went and told him. He called police. The police, however, said they couldn't corroborate any of the information because, again, this was coming from like a third party. So it's not like you and I going forward and telling the police. She told her boyfriend. The boyfriend went to the police. The police said, well, we need her as a witness. We need somebody that could come in and swear out, I saw it this date, this time, this is what. And they knew that the couple were drug users. So again, they didn't feel that there was enough information to go forward. So you have a reporting person who's a drug user, the girlfriend who's a drug user, and the police just went, I don't know, Brandy. To me, I know you're a drug user. I know you're not reliable. I know we're not going to use you in court. But if somebody's coming to me and saying, I'm seeing ID cards and bloody clothes and empty purses, I'm going to look into it.
Yeah, and not enough for a warrant. I have known a lot less that has happened, and a warrant has been issued. So that's very odd to me to not at least. What does it hurt to go in and search?
Well, but again, they don't have bodies. They don't have missing person reports. They have what they feel is a drug addict coming forward and providing information. It's not going to go anywhere, and it didn't. So in 99, now a year later, right, this started in 95, police received another tip from somebody else that said that Pinkton has a freezer full of human flesh and body parts. They go out there, they question him. He said he's got nothing to do with missing women. He doesn't know who they are, doesn't know what he's talking about, but he gives them permission to search his premises. Goes, search, go anywhere you want. I don't care. Now, wait a minute. This is a guy that knows he's got purses, ID cards, bloody clothes, and body parts in a freezer, but he is such a convincing communicator. He said, search whatever you want. I give you my permission. I don't care. Go wherever you want. And they decide not to. And they even failed to continue the investigation because they said, we don't have the resources to follow up on this. He gave them free rein.
This is really, again, missed opportunities, but confidence. He is telling them we saw this in other cases, John, letting, do what you need to do. Why would I do this? This is what I do for a living. I slaughter. So if there's blood, he's inviting them in, and he feels so, I don't know. Did he think they would just say no? Did he feel like whatever influence he had over that conversation, they were going to decline his offer to search? I mean, unbelievable. Another missed opportunity here.
Brandy, I'll tell you, I've been in law enforcement for decades. If anyone tells me, go ahead, John, search my car, search my house, I'm searching it. I'm getting them to sign the consent to search paper. Okay, you're voluntarily allowing me to search your property, search your car. I've got the documents now. I'm going to look for whatever I can. They could have done it, and they didn't.
Well, and
And
you
now,
have, John, you also have people calling in about this guy. This isn't the first time. His name keeps coming up. The property keeps coming up. You have to have some reasonable thought in your head like, okay, maybe this will stop the phone calls if we then do this and look at his property, make sure we don't see anything nefarious, and then we can all move on. But they choose not to do that.
right, yeah,
Wild.
I mean, that's very valid. I didn't think about that, but to just stop the phone calls, they should have said, we'll search it, and if we don't find anything, somebody else calls. We just know these are drug-induced parties going on at the pig farm. So now we have this serial killer who, and we've talked about other serial killers who bring in accomplices, right? The highway strangler, absolutely crazy. 4 different people helped him kill, but often that was his downfall. And now we're going to see this as Pinkton's downfall. He brings in a female accomplice, Lynn Ellington. She was a prostitute that he had used for quite a while. He had paid her on and off. He had given her drugs. He had given her money. And so they were kind of not a couple, but well known to each other. Let's put it that way. So Lynn Ellington here rides into town with Pinkton in order to pick up a prostitute. Now, what is she thinking is going to happen? She knows this guy, right? The prostitute doesn't want to get in the car, but Lynn convinced her, right? Oh, I'm with him. There's 2 of us. Nothing's going to happen. I know this guy. We're going to get good drugs. And she gets in the car with him. They go back to the pig farm. They're both doing drugs with Pinkton. They're both having sex with him. And Lynn passes out. When she wakes up, now this is accomplished, passes out. When she wakes up, she sees a light on in the slaughterhouse. So she's in the main house. She has to walk across the dirt area, and she sees the light on in the slaughterhouse. She goes over there, and she notices a woman hanging from a hook in the slaughterhouse and recognizes her as Georgina, the prostitute she helped pick up earlier in the evening.
What a frightening scenario to see, I imagine. But why not run the other way? She approaches him. She sees this happening. I mean, just unbelievable. Does he confront her, John? What does Pinkton do when he knows that Lynn is kind of watching this?
Well, not only was she watching, she walked in.
You're walking in knowing this happened. How do you know this isn't going to happen to you? So
Yeah.
why not turn around and run the other way? Just
Brandy, you're thinking like a rational adult female. I don't know what to tell you. She had been with the guy for a while, sex, drugs, whatever. She walks in. He knows now that Lynn sees him gutting Georgina like a pig and hanging her up. And he tells her at this point, if you say anything, you're the next one on the hook. I'm so excited about this news. It's been a long time in the making, and today we're letting you know about our brand new True Crime and Wine Club. Yes, a wine club specifically designed for true crime lovers and featuring our double gold winning crime scene and our True Crime and Wine red blend that won top Texas wine, as well as our latest edition, a brand new wine called Cold Case. So, in the coming months, we'll also be releasing several other wines into this wine club, like our Casaro Wine Club. It's free to join. You only pay for the 2 bottles you receive each quarter. So if you want to be a member of our True Crime and Wine Club with our True Crime and Wine branded wines, Just go to CasaroWines.com, click on the True Crime and Wine page, and sign up today and join our True Crime and Wine Club. You'll receive 2 bottles each quarter. It's a great value and a wonderful way to listen to our podcast and enjoy our award-winning wine. Salute. Lynn was afraid for her life at this point, at least we think so, because she never called the police, but she did tell one of her girlfriends about it. The police went and interviewed Lynn. Now, we have been on the air for more than 12 minutes, right? And it hasn't been anything as horrific as I was having sex with this other girl and this man, and we were doing drugs, and I walk in and I see her hanging from a hook being gutted in a slaughterhouse. They only interviewed her for 12 minutes. And then they let her go without any further investigation because she was a drug addict and they didn't feel she's credible. How many times? How many times can this happen, Brandy?
Here we go again. I mean, and this is the same man that keeps coming up. These are not prostitutes coming in and talking about different people, different locations, different areas. This is the same man coming up, and she witnesses this. Now you have an eyewitness to what he's actually doing. John, unbelievable. What is going through your mind as a police officer? What are they thinking?
And I just can't. I mean, that story alone, to me, is going to warrant hours of interview, right? And even longer investigation just to get it right. I've been in that situation. And I've been in that situation with prostitutes and drug users. And you know, if you spend a long time with them, if you interview them over and over, you can tell if their story is consistent. You can tell were they traumatized by it. You can tell. You're asking, well, who's the friend? Who did you go to? Who else can we see? What other evidence we have? But yeah, remember before they told the drug addict, well, you heard it from somebody else who saw it, so it's really third hand. We can't take. She walked in on him. She is the eyewitness.
Just unbelievable. Now we have an eyewitness and another missed opportunity to take this guy in and get him off the streets. But I want to know more about the crime scene, John, the pig farm. How is he using this? I mean, is he getting more bold? Is he committing more crimes? Do we have more phone calls coming in? You know, let's talk about this crime scene a bit.
Yeah, it was a great cover for him, honestly, because he regularly slaughtered animals in the course of his business, right? He raised hogs, he slaughtered them, he brought them to market. Matter of fact, it was not unusual for years to see him going down to the east side where the rendering plant is, and he would be covered with blood. He would have 55-gallon drums. He would have animal parts. So that wasn't uncommon at all. No one knew they also had human parts in there, but he used a local meat factory to dispose of the animal remains. And the factory kept no records of the meat or the transactions. They simply disposed of it. So it was bring it to us, pay us, we'll dispose of it. And there was significant traffic on the farm throughout the day because remember his brother had that kind of party house on there and he was bringing prostitutes and drug addicts in, some of them that worked for him, you know, rendering animals and others doing other things. But a typical day at the pig farm, you saw drug addicts, prostitutes, convicted criminals, and women continued to disappear. But because there were no bodies, the police simply looked to solve other crimes. So it ended up being almost the perfect cover, not just for a murderer, but for a serial killer.
Well, and I also think when you have so much activity and this person and people are coming up missing, there are no bodies, but you have people that are in and out of this place and that traffic. So, and now and I think about the fact of now you not only have the police kind of dropping the ball with some of these missed opportunities, you now have this local meat factory where he's bringing this and they're not checking anything, keeping track of what he's actually disposing of. And it's like he's getting bolder and bolder and bolder that nobody's going to catch him doing this. I mean, they're in and out all day, and police are not coming up, asking any questions, investigating the activity happening on this property day to day. And you just have to wonder why. I feel like it's just so mind boggling that there's so many people involved with him on the radar and nothing's happening.
And when they do question him, they let him go. And when they do question eyewitnesses, they don't believe them. So it just kept getting worse. And we talked earlier in the show about that control. Is he getting more and more power and control? Yeah, with every kill, with every time a witness comes forward and they don't believe him, with every time he's interviewed and he talks his way out of it.
So in 1999, something happens to Brenda Wolf. Tell us about Brenda.
Yeah, Brenda, she is a streetwise, tough prostitute. She trained other prostitutes, and we know there's a hierarchy out there in the street, and she is one of the tough ones. And she is paid very well on multiple occasions by Picton to go to the pig farm, to do drugs, to have sex. So she trusts him, right? This has been an ongoing gig of hers. She gets a lot of money, she gets drugs, they have sex, she goes back. But one night, she didn't return. And she was never seen again until they finally discovered body parts at the pig farm. So, 98, she disappears, but nobody knows anything still for years later.
Wow. Okay, so what happens between 98, 99, 2000? Is he still on their radar? Are there any other calls coming in? There are more and more and more missing women coming up. I can only imagine the community was looking for answers. So, what are police doing now?
Yeah, I actually got a copy of one of the posters from 2001 that the Vancouver Police Department put out and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and their task force. And there's over 60 women on the poster now. 60 women, most of them Indigenous First Nations women in Canada that are missing. And the pressure coming from the First Nations community, because that was really the only advocate for these women, forced Vancouver PD and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police to launch a joint task force. Now, remember, Picton was picked up in 1997 for his attack on Wendy, but he was released. And and he was brought in for questioning, but he was released because they didn't have enough on him. So now Picton kind of reemerges on the task force radar. And the task force starts asking the community about him. Who is this guy? Is there more we need to know? Well, the community came forward and said, we know he frequents the prostitutes. We know he has lots of cash, and we know he pays them well. We also know that he knows a lot of convicted criminals, especially drug addicts, because he brings them to the pig farm for the parties as workers, several different things. Now, some of the locals also knew him as a very hard worker. And they actually, now Brandy, don't get sick, they actually purchased meat from him or from the butcher shops he supplied. You know where I'm going with this, don't you?
This reminds me of when the blood was in the cookies and the tea, and the person
Exactly.
and they enjoy the control, right? A part of that control is watching others, basically
Consume.
ingest what you have done. I mean, it's the sick part that I will never understand. But there is a control sense to that, John. And like, look at you, you know, eating and enjoying, but you don't really know, like, you really don't know what I'm doing. So, ugh, I can only
But
imagine.
they end up finding out later, and it creates more victims, right? And for our listeners, if you didn't hear our podcast called A Cup of Murder, then we don't want to give you too much information, but there are similarities. And we also discovered now that he's known to police because they would regularly see him in his bloody clothes, and they'd see him going to the local butcher, and they would see him and purchase his meat from the butcher stores and grocery stores in the Vancouver area. So this is not just the community, this is now the police that know. So that is kind of his MO. And from June to November, we see that the killing continues. We're now 6 years into this plus that we know of, right? In June of 2001, there was a prostitute. She was a drug addict in a methadone program. She was reported missing by the drugstore owner that said she didn't come in for her weekly methadone treatment. In July of 2001, another prostitute that went missing. In November of 2001, Mona Wilson, they had sex, they argued. He shot her in the head with a 22 and dumped her in a trash can. So the killing is continuing here, and the police have finally got to do something.
Yeah, and I think the profiling that you do and what we talk about, I think we have it all, right? The motive. Well, I don't know if we know really a motive, except he likes control. The crime scene, the weapons that he has, his preparation of inviting them on the property. I think as a prostitute, right? A lot of them are drug users, and you're going to give them drugs and you're going to get paid to come. So I can see how he was able to convince people, and lure them to him, right? That's
Right.
what he did. He didn't have to go and hit them over the head and drag them to the pig farm. They came willingly. And so now you have something happening in 2001. These actually continue. So are there any search warrants? Are we finally going to see police do something about this?
We're finally going to see a search warrant, but for those following along with the True Crime Profiler's Notebook, which, of course, you can get it at shoptruecrime.com. If you're profiling along with us, now the behavioral characteristics, you do have an isolated loner, mental health issues, low IQ, need of control, wanting control, figuring out he can get it. Now he has cash. He can buy prostitutes, pay prostitutes, torture prostitutes, kill prostitutes, and dispose of them. For your geographic profiling in your notebook, obviously his comfort zone is the east side of Vancouver, where he's picking them up, and the pig farm. So the geographic profiling fits right there, and as a disposal place, the pig farm. And finally, victimology. We know he's going for females, prostitutes working in the east side, and many of them First Nations or Indigenous women. So for those that are profiling along, that's what we do on the show. And you can see these very clear profiles emerge. But the police didn't figure it out until after finally another person. How many people got to come forward? He's a truck driver that used to work on the pig farm. And he told the police he knew that Picton had illegal weapons. Now, we've already seen witnesses say, I saw a dead girl hanging on a hook, bleeding out, but that's not good enough. But a truck driver that says he's got illegal guns, they get a warrant. They go to his, yeah, yeah. The dead bodies with the personal witness is not enough, but apparently a truck driver who says he saw a gun, and how does he know it's illegal, right? How does he know?
In the fridge, maybe body parts in the
Yeah,
freezer.
we did have body parts in the freezer.
Enough?
Yep.
Oh,
So the
mind-boggling.
police get a warrant for guns. And they don't find any illegal weapons. But what they did find were items from missing women. Remember 5 years ago when they
Yep, yep.
reported purses, bloody clothes, identification cards? Those were souvenirs he was keeping. So now officers back out. Now all of a sudden they're going, oh crap. Maybe everything people have been telling us for over half a decade now is true. So they back out, they get a new search warrant, and they find ID cards from the victims, transit cards from the victims, garbage bags of clothes, and many personal effects from numerous women. The search ended up being the largest crime scene in Canadian history at that point, and they spent over $70 million on searching for and recovering bodies. The search lasted 22 months.
John, it's kind of mind boggling to think about the fact that, I mean, but you have to wonder how long was this really going on? And I'm looking at that poster of all of those faces. I mean, 22 months, I don't even know if that seems like enough time and what they've actually uncovered in those 22 months. But if he was keeping these things as souvenirs, they are now matching IDs to names and really trying to put all these pieces together. But I mean, $70 million. I mean, unbelievable. But God, at least they went in and are finding these things and looking for these answers.
But how many women totally disappeared? How many ended up in the belly of hogs and at the rendering plant in Vancouver, where there was nothing left? Now, when they finally arrested Picton for it, he told them nothing during the interrogation. Nothing. He wasn't going to admit to anything, didn't know what they were talking about. But they put him in a cell with an undercover police officer, and he bragged to him that I know I committed 49 murders, but I wish it could have been an even 50. But Brandy, do you think it was that low? Do you think even 50 covered all of those bodies? I don't.
No, and I think because he is getting, if it is true that people were on this property every day, if this was in and out of every day, I mean, John, how many did he have a week? I
Right.
mean, that's where my mind goes, is he had the time, the opportunity, the free will on his property to do as he pleased. I'm not convinced of that number.
Yeah, and when they executed the search warrant, they did find the bodies of and body parts of many, many people. But they admitted most of the remains were hard to identify because of decomposition or they'd been eaten by insects or the pigs. They did find an inhaler and directly linked that inhaler. It still had the prescription on it to one of the victims. And they found evidence that the bodies were ground up and fed to the pigs, and others were ground in with the pork and sold at local stores and butcher shops.
And this kind of, when this is actually found out and people start learning about what this guy truly did, I mean, unbelievable.
Yep. So from February to October 2002, he was charged with 15 counts of murder. And in 2003, it was raised to 27 counts of murder, 27 different homicides. Just to kind of wrap up the case here, they did find a 22 revolver there. It had DNA from victims on it. They found human skulls, some cut in half. They found some stuffed with hands and feet of either that victim or other victims, body parts in garbage bags, bloody clothes in his trailer, a jawbone with teeth in the slaughterhouse. He actually had night vision goggles and fake fur-lined handcuffs and a syringe filled with an aphrodisiac. He was prepared. He had a kill kit. He was an organized killer, as we know. They did bring Lynn Ellison back in to testify that she saw Georgina on the meat hook and saw her skinned and fed to the pigs. He told them later on that he would inject heroin addicts with windshield wiper fluid to kill them. So that's how he killed some of his victims. Others he handcuffed and strangled before bleeding them out, gutting them, and feeding them to the pigs. Before it was finally over, police had 80 unidentified DNA profiles from men and women collected at the farm, in addition to all the body parts.
Yeah, John, that just tells me that this count is probably in the hundreds. I mean,
Yeah,
I just can't. 80 unidentified profiles. Um, I mean, I know some people weren't murdered, right? That necessarily came onto the property. But again, to me, the convenience of saying, oh, I killed 49, but I wanted to get to 50, that just seems like a really convenient number and a
yep.
brag, not actuality. And I think we're dealing with a much higher number.
Yeah, and so people started asking how could the signs have been missed, and they
Yeah.
said, "Hey, we saw him regularly in bloody clothes and unkempt. He had been like that since a kid, so it wasn't abnormal." Police officers saw him dropping off meat. It wasn't abnormal. Again, the victims, prostitutes from the low track, the east side area, nobody to really speak up for them. The pig farm was trashy. It had all manner of drug addicts in and out of there. It was a nuisance. And the police simply did not fully investigate all of those disappearing women from the east side. The judge ended up separating this into two different trials. 6 victims in one, 20 in the other. The 6 they had really, really solid forensic evidence on, and the 20 were kind of partial, so they separated. We do that a lot in the criminal justice system. Want to get a conviction on one, may not get it on the other. He was convicted of second-degree murder of 6 victims and sentenced to 25 years in prison on each count with no parole. And but he wasn't convicted of first-degree murder because the jurors couldn't believe no one could do this alone. That's what they said. Oh, he had to have an accomplice. He couldn't have done it alone. What about the younger brother? The younger brother lived on the property. He hosted wild parties. He had criminals. He had drug users and prostitutes, but they never connected him with it. Even though Lynn testified to see him with the woman on the hook. Nobody else was around, but the jurors said, no, we can't convict him of first-degree murder. He was, however, convicted of second degree on the first 6 victims and sentenced to 25 years on each count with no parole. So he did end up going to prison for the rest of his life.
I find it unbelievable they had 200,000 DNA samples. This is the largest crime scene in Canadian history, like you mentioned. 600,000 exhibits. I mean, just yeah, I agree. He didn't act alone. Again, we even see cases where there's possible other accomplices. Nobody's been named. They're not looking for them anymore because now they have their guy. They have their main guy. I don't know why that wasn't enough in the juror's eyes. But thankfully this guy was caught. Hopefully a lot of these families got some answers, but we know a lot of them just didn't.
Right. And the good thing about getting him off the street is no other women fell victim to him. It's just a shame that we had so many witnesses come forward, so many people that talked to the police and said, we think he's up to something. Women are disappearing. We're finding bloody clothes. We're finding IDs. And it took so long for justice to be served. And just lots of women died. And I've seen the photos from the crime scene. I've seen the photos from the pig farm. I've seen the photos from the search site. And it looks like an absolute war zone. There was so much to search. Almost an impossible task, but you can see why it took nearly 2 years. So, Brandy, this kind of concludes our story of the pig farmer and his victims in Canada. As we put a cork in this edition of True Crime and Wine podcast, I want to remind our listeners you can follow us on all of our socials at JJ True Crime and Wine. You can sign up for our True Crime Wine Club at CasaroWines.com, CASSARO wines.com. And you can go to our True Crime and Wine page and simply sign up for the wine club. If you're interested in the True Crime Profiler's Notebook or any of our logo merchandise, the koozies, the tumblers, the wine glasses like I have, you can find those at shoptruecrime.com. Shoptruecrime.com. So you can profile killers along with Brandy and I. And I think that wraps up our business for today. And of course, I want to thank my co-host Brandy Diamond for joining me on this journey, and our producer Lauren Bedso back in the Corsicana Command Center for helping to make this show possible. And we'll see you next time on the next episode when we present The Butcher of Rostov, a serial killer who traveled the countryside in search of victims. But he was such a sociopath and a good communicator, he talked himself out of getting arrested even after he was stopped coming out of the woods with mud on his clothes and blood on his face. I'm John Matthews. Thanks for joining us today for True Crime and Wine. Salute.